Hey, welcome back to the eDrum Workshop. I'm Luke and I hope you're having a great day. I came across this new sample multipad called the nPad on Friday thanks to Alan from Digital Drummer posting about it on their Facebook group, and I thought it was too interesting to pass up on making a quick video about it. I'm going to run through what's currently known about this product from what the creators have written about it and what they've put in their videos. There's a link to their channel in the description. I'm going to give my general impressions of the feature set that's been confirmed so far, talk about the pricing, and just give some thoughts about it being in the eDrum space. Whenever new gear comes up, I'm going to be trying my best to cover it on the channel, so make sure to subscribe and hit the bell if you want to stay up to date with new electronic drum products, news, reviews, discussions, and handy tips and tricks. So this multipad, the nPad, hasn't come to market yet. It's currently up on Kickstarter looking to raise €6,000 in crowdfunding to make it possible. As of recording this, they're currently at €2,652. Just to be clear, I haven't been asked to make this video, nor am I sponsored by the company making this, but I have personally backed this Kickstarter at the super early bird level, which is now unavailable. The company behind the nPad is called dbdrums, and they're a company from Argentina, and they're aiming to create affordable electronic drum products. They've been making them since 1998, but somehow they've managed to slip under my radar, so I did a little bit of looking into their product line, and they offer kits that look quite like you might expect. Some basic pad kits with the sort of third covered cymbal pads similar to a Roland CY8 or some of the Modeli pads, but some of their kits have larger shells though, sitting somewhere between your standard pad kits and the Roland style deeper pads. From a listen to the sound examples of those kits, they seem pretty standard fare for the price range that they're in. Anyway, on to the nPad. It's been asserted to Alan from Digital Drummer that this multipad is definitely not a rebadged Modeli instrument, and from the promotional videos on their Kickstarter, it seems pretty apparent that this is true. From looking at their Kickstarter page with the reward prices, it looks like this is going to retail at a full price of about $570 to $580, or that translates to €480 in Europe and approximately £420 in the UK. Coming in under that $600, €500 and just over £400 is a great spot to hit in my opinion, as from what I can tell that's at least $100 euros pounds below the established standard SPD-SX and Alesis Strike Multipad prices. I think you can get a Yamaha DTX Multi12 for a slightly better price in some regions than this will finally retail at, but if you back the nPad on Kickstarter now, there's the option of getting this multipad even cheaper. At the time of writing, there's 9 available at €240, which works out about $272. There are 50 available at the €270, which is $305 price point, and 100 left at €370 or $420. There are also some bundle options where you can save on the price of the pad plus a stand, or a full kit variant with a hi-hat pedal, a mini kick drum pad, an 8-inch snare pad, and a cymbal pad, along with the stand and a soft case. So there's plenty of chance to get this at a lower price than the final retail price if you think you might want one. And they also ship internationally for free. As far as the design goes, this takes on the standard form factor that we pretty much expect from a multipad at this point. It's a 9-pad setup with 6 larger face pads and 3 thinner pads along the top lip. And those 3 pads are raised quite significantly, much like on the Alesis Strike Multipad and the DTX Multi12, rather than the ones on the SPD-SX, which are only ever so slightly raised, pretty much flush with the others. I'm not really surprised by this choice, it seems the most logical at this point. The overall shape and the style of the fascia on the bottom though is much closer to that of the SPD-SX, along with the black and red outline colour scheme and the small red LED lights. Most of their other kit and pad options come in a black and red colour scheme, and their logo kind of has that colour scheme too, so I guess it does make some sense brand-wise. It is very similar though. There are fewer buttons and controls on this unit than we're kind of used to seeing on most other multipads. From left to right, we've got the power button with some external pad and foot switch indicator LEDs above it, a dial which I'm assuming to be a volume knob, a set of 4 function buttons, one for the click, one labelled rec, which from what I've read I think will be for recording loops or patterns, a kit button presumably to adjust the kit parameters, and a setup button where again I assume is where the other settings are going to live. Next you have the screen, which is very reminiscent of the SPD-SX screen. It's monochromatic, it's quite small, it's functional. Some up and down selection buttons, possibly just page up and down buttons, an OK button and a select button. I'm not 100% sure what the difference between those two buttons will be, but I'm sure there's something. Then you have a big old selection dial with a plus and minus button underneath. Going off my SPD-SX experience, I'm assuming the plus and minus buttons are for finer control and kit changes, whereas the dial is for speedier access to parameter control. Around the back, you'll notice that once again it's a little bit more limited than some of the other offerings. There's a power port, then much like on the SPD-SX, there's 2 jack inputs for up to 4 single zone triggers. Unlike the SPD-SX and more like the Strike Multipad, there's 2 foot switch inputs here. I actually reached out to dbdrums to ask a few questions about the unit, and they were kind enough to get back to me quickly with the answers. I was wondering exactly how the foot switch and hi-hat function worked with these inputs, and they've told me that they can be used either as 2 hi-hat controllers, 2 foot switches, or 2 kicks. They also confirmed to me that at the moment, the hi-hat functionality is just an on-off, open and closed function. This wasn't really surprising to me since this isn't a full drum module with a bunch of velocity layers, and it will probably serve the function that it's intended for just fine with that limited functionality. But I thought it'd be useful to know for anybody who might be hoping for more, or even just to be aware that the foot switch inputs can be used for a range of purposes. The more astute of you might have noticed too that the hi-hat pedal that they're supplying with the bundle is a Modeli hi-hat controller that's been shipped with other brands before, like the old Alesis DM5 Pro kits. As far as I'm aware, this pedal is just a simple open and closed pedal, so that makes sense. So continuing along round the back, there's a USB-B port for hooking up to a computer. One of the promo videos says that that's for USB MIDI, which makes sense, and a USB-A port for user samples. Then we have the 5-pin MIDI in and out port, which is always good to see, followed up by an AUX input, presumably just for being able to play along to other sound sources. There's a main left and right output with its own dedicated volume knob. So if I was right earlier about the volume knob on the front, I can only assume that the one on the front is the headphone volume. Interesting placement of the master volume here. I'd probably prefer it on the front myself, but I suppose you can sort of set and forget with it here. And finally, a 6.33mm or 1/4" headphone out socket. If there was any other design from the Strike Multipad that I'd have liked to have seen, it would have been the headphone port on the front, or even the 2 different sized outputs. I feel like that does make more sense overall, but it is this way round on the SPD-SX too, so I'm not really complaining. As you might have noticed, the main things lacking on the back compared to the Roland and Strike pads are the audio in sockets for sampling and an extra pair of outputs. My guess on the first point is that they aren't there as sampling isn't a feature on this multipad. I could be wrong and that record button could be referring to that, and maybe it just uses the AUX in, but there's no mention of it anywhere, whereas it does mention MIDI pattern looping. And also, I kind of feel like the sampling function is probably one of the least used aspects of the other sample pads. I could be wrong there, maybe a bunch of people use it all the time, but I've personally never used it at all, and most people that I do know that have a sample pad do so exclusively for loading their own samples via USB, or they even use it just purely as a trigger interface for software like Ableton. I feel like if there was any feature worth cutting to bring the end consumer price down and save on some development, this is the one that makes the most sense. The lack of the extra pair of outputs is a little bit more of a sore point for me. I make use of the sub outputs on my SPD-SX a lot, and actually one of my main gripes is that there's not enough routing options to properly separate things between the master and sub outputs on the SPD-SX. If this had an extra 2 pair of outputs and the flexibility to route it however you like, I would have loved that feature. Unfortunately, that's not the case here, and I've also had it confirmed to me that the metronome can't be separated out from the master output and be routed to the headphones only. Now this may or may not be a deal breaker for you. With my original intended use for this pad, a potential potential SPD-SX replacement, then that would have been a problem. I'm now thinking that this will likely just be used as a simple sample holding percussion pad, which I guess is really its intended purpose, so that's less of a problem for that use, but I thought that would be useful for people to know going in. Speaking of replacing other multipads, I also inquired about the size of the internal memory, and this once again could be the clincher for some people. It's got 512 megabytes of flash memory inside. This is akin to the old SPD-S model, and if I remember rightly, the same as the Yamaha Multi12. This is a bit of a shame, as although I've been assured that this means that the triggering is very fast due to the nature of the flash memory, in 2020 some more memory would have been very useful. I forgot to ask if the 620 samples that come inside the unit are part of that memory allocation or not, so I might try and get some confirmation down the line on that, or I'll just know when I get the unit myself. For the Kickstarter price, this will work well as a general sample pad that's not holding long samples or backing tracks, but if you were looking at it in the future down the line at full price up against the competition, it might not be as strong an option depending on what you wanted to use it for. As far as other features go, it's got built-in effects, reverb and EQ, there's tuning and muffling options, and there's also a velocity switching function so you can layer two sounds on one pad. This is a function that the old SPD-S had, and then they took it out and locked it only to the Octopad in the Roland range, and the Strike Multipad has this too, so I'm happy that this feature's made it in. It should make things a bit more interesting for things like percussion samples, and just generally other fun options. If I remember rightly, the Yamaha DTX Multi12 still has this beat, and you can have 4 layers on each pad, but at least the nPad sits comfortably in with the Roland and Strike lines. Then it looks like there's the usual sensitivity, threshold and velocity curve options too. Another unknown at the moment is exactly what the full scope of their triggering will be like. It appears to work well on the short demo videos, but how well this is going to work with different pads, and exactly how many parameters there will be to fine-tune things remains to be seen. To me, this is looking like a decent contender, but there might be some features that you need that aren't catered for. Coming in under the price of the SPD-SX and the Strike Multipads is a good start. The main things I'm hoping for are good pad feel and triggering, and being robust enough to take a good beating in a live environment. I think that for people who might be looking specifically at using a multipad as a MIDI controller to a computer, the price point here seems pretty enticing, especially at the current Kickstarter price. It's effectively positioned itself somewhere between the old bad Alesis SamplePad Pro and the SPD-SX, and hopefully with being a small company they'll continue to support it with firmware updates in the future if anything needs ironing out, and the rest of the feature set and build quality will allow it to be a solid option. I've backed this myself because I'm genuinely interested in seeing how well it performs, and I want to see more options available to people and to be able to see smaller companies come to the market successfully. Obviously, they seem to have already established themselves within a certain space, but I want the electronic drum market to grow, and this is one way that I feel I could help that. So go check out their Kickstarter if this interests you at all. I've put a link in the description. It's running until Friday the 10th of April. You could pick one of these up from the first batch for an incredibly low price if you think that it's the kind of product you would want. As I say, I've not been sponsored or asked to do this at all. It's just something that I'm interested in, and I gathered that a lot of you would be too, so I wanted to help spread the word. Of course, there's always going to be some kind of inherent risk with these things on Kickstarter. There's always chance that these things won't live up to expectations, so only pledge if you either believe in it or you want it. I'll be doing a full review when I get hold of the pad myself, so check that out in the future. These pads should be with people in June according to the Kickstarter timeline. So that's it from me. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Instagram, check out any of the videos on the screen, and let me know down in the comments what you think about this at this point in time. Do you think it looks any good or not? Enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers!